bit later. Price increases by manufacturers and the Affordable Care Act and all the politics around that. I think there's a few things we should think about, so let me try and address a few things so we can kind of broaden our perspective on it and understand a little bit more about how these things fit into our general thinking. As I understand it, the president of Mylan Labs was on it was in Congress today testifying with regard to the price increases for EpiPen, the drug that's used for people who have severe allergies and need an immediate relief. Clearly, there are issues here with regard to pharmaceutical manufacturers' price increases that they're doing. One argument being that they're doing it to be consistent with the marketplace. Another argument being that this is all going to profits and it's a way to pay attention and to get a larger premium when many of the drugs are going generic. The real issue that we need to think about, though, in a broader perspective, is that clearly pharmaceutical manufacturers are on the hot seat for price increases. No question about that. But we're also living in a world where transparency is becoming bigger and bigger due to the fact that patients are paying a bigger share of the cost of drugs. That's one issue. And the other part of it is that both insurers, health plans, as well as the self-insured employers and government agencies are all concerned about the money that they're spending, and as budgets are either restricted, reduced, or under some sort of fixed trend. If, for example, the trend is 3%, the cost can only go up 3%, but costs of all healthcare go up faster, then clearly there is a concern. This issue of transparency is just beginning and is beginning to be a concern for everyone. Clearly, pharmaceutical manufacturers will be held responsible. Device manufacturers will be held responsible. Insurers will be held responsible for their premiums. They already are. Pharmacy benefit managers will be held responsible for their spread, for how much money that they keep or that they have when they pay for generic drugs, the cost that they have for branded drugs. Many of the PBMs are marketing the fact that they have reduced the costs by having multiple branded in a given category, negotiating with certain manufacturers for a better price. That's kind of a throwback to what we've been doing for years with categories that have a lot of brands, and so we've addressed that. But it's no different, and as long as you have multiple branded products, then you can negotiate one product versus another in order to get a lower price. The things that they're going to be held responsible for are not just what did they save, but how much of it did they keep? How much do they get for doing that negotiation? Furthermore, there's going to be checks with regard to pharmacies and how much they are, and physicians as well. So everybody is going to be held responsible for what goes on for the cost of drugs, the cost of devices, the cost of healthcare in general. And this transparency issue isn't going to just stop with manufacturers. It's clearly a egregious type of concern when people raise the price of drugs significantly, but as Allergan CEO came out and identified that he would hold it to a fixed rate every year, it is something that people expect is going to increase on a yearly basis, but they're going to compare it to what the consumer price index is, to what the cost of care is, and they're going to be looking for that and anything that is above that. So cost of drugs is only one piece of it, and clearly it's the cause célèbre of today, but will be an issue that will be addressed by everybody, both insurers and vendors and physicians and pharmacies, et cetera, going forward. The other thing to talk about here is the Affordable Care Act. Clearly, this whole issue is highly politicized, and there are multiple arguments on both sides of the political spectrum. But at the end of the day, what goes on with regard to the Affordable Care Act is not a lot different than what has happened with all of the government programs that have been going on for years. Medicare itself has been amended 11 or changed 11 times at least. So have many of the other programs. And what's of interest and note to us is that while politics plays the part in getting these programs passed, whether it's for Democrats or Republicans, and remember that the Affordable Care Act was promoted by 7 different presidents, both Republicans and Democrats. So we're looking at programs that people who are heads of the United States have realized that something had to be done, whatever the program was. But when you look at it, the main issue is that these changes that have occurred in management and changes to formulas and the way the programs that are managed, rather than trying to manage everything with regard to politics. So what we're looking at here is changes that are already occurring to the Affordable Care Act with regard to management concerns, formulas that have been set up for risk, etc. We thought it'd be kind of interesting to just talk for a moment about one of the examples in the Affordable Care Act to try and address what is being done. I'm not taking a political position in this particular regard. I don't really care. What we're trying to understand is what is being done with regard to management, as has been done with the rest of Medicare, whether it's A or B or C in that regard. And what we've seen, if we take an example of the cooperatives, where there's cooperatives between a insurer, physicians, and other healthcare providers in delivering care, those cooperatives have not done particularly well financially, but some of them have done particularly well when they're providing primary care. One reason is that in providing primary care, you get a lot of volume and you get a lot of steady income, but necessarily the severity of patients, how sick the patients are, is not as big a concern. Well, because several of them have not made it, there has been changes that have been addressed and are supposed to change in 2018, although many people are asking for them to change in 2017. And the major emphasis here is the following. One is primary care teams may be the approach under the patient-controlled medical homes and the other systems to try and give a integrated approach to healthcare that includes physicians and nurses and pharmacists and case managers and everyone else in order to try and deliver care. In so doing, these co-ops have been dealing with, in some cases, sicker patients than they expected because of the way that the Affordable Care Act was put together. And some people have argued that it was put together in a not very smart way about how it was done, especially from a financial standpoint. Well, what's been done to presumably change that is that there is an emphasis on primary care in order to get more people covered. There's also an emphasis on what happens to the risk adjustment formula. What we're talking about here is that on one level, fee-for-service is moving to a value of care, and that value of care from a proxy standpoint looks a lot like a per member per month or a set amount that's paid for every member based on a host of different parameters on how sick the patient population is, et cetera. It's also been established that risk adjustment formulas don't pay very much. Traditionally, they pay about 12 cents on the dollar, which traditionally has not been strong enough in order to make these programs work. So there's been questions as to whether that's enough. There's also been an emphasis in the primary care model to base care on evidence-based medicine, and that evidence-based medicine is at least putting a minimum standard of care on everyone, understanding that the sickest patients aren't going to have a particular standard. You're going to have to do independent and specific things for them, and for people who are very well, for which there aren't many problems, those people don't require much care. And so there's a volume standpoint where you get a lot of people in, but in fact you're not changing many things because of severity. The real key to all of this has to deal with the risk adjustment formula. And what's been done traditionally is that a patient had to see a doctor within the year that they're being evaluated. Well, if you're evaluating that in November, they may not have seen the doctor in that time period, or they won't see the doctor between November and December, so you lose out on the severity of that patient. Furthermore, there are programs that were grandfathered where they could, in fact, identify that they would exclude people with pre-existing conditions. Those grandfather situations are going to be removed in 2018. And the risk formula, where you add up all the people's diagnoses, and those who have the higher risks are going to get more money, and those who have lower risks are effectively going to give money to those that have higher risks. The problem is that you couldn't capture all of the diagnoses, and especially if they hadn't seen doctors. Pharmacy data was not included before. Presumably in the 2018 change, they will include pharmacy data, which will allow you to capture all diagnoses for which they're being treated besides the medical data, and in that regard give a more accurate way of identifying the patient population. What we're seeing there is that primary care for getting a volume of patients, evidence-based medicine to have a minimum standard of care for everyone, a risk adjustment formula that includes all the information, so irregardless of when you see the doctor or whatever diagnoses the doctor reports, you get a larger picture of what all of these are, and then effectively modifying that risk adjustment so that everybody has some benefit, and they're not paying as much from a low-risk population that in fact is higher, but they didn't have all the information or all the data to deal with it. So there are management ways of dealing with many of these problems. Whether they'll exist after the election or not doesn't matter. The bottom line is whatever program that the government has come up with, there has always been a political issue in getting the program approved, and then after that, all the changes that had to go on in order to deal with things that were either expected, not expected. There was people that had best interests, but in fact things didn't work out that way or otherwise. Those are a couple of things that are going on today. Hopefully we've had a chance to quickly identify some of the issues for it. Please feel free to dial in to propharmaconsultants.com/rxinfox.html for daily news and what's going on in a host of areas with regard to healthcare benefits and drugs. And also feel free to click on live notification in the upper right corner in order to allow you to see this after we've done it. We hope you have a wonderful week, and don't forget to tune in every Wednesday at noontime for a live broadcast, and we'll look forward to talking to you next week. Be well and have a great week.